Hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. My name is OctoMan, and welcome to this live stream about how to work properly with prefabs. I got a request from Grant. He was writing in the community tab. So if you have any requests, by the way, feel free to check it out. He wrote he has some problems using prefabs properly as game objects and how they can do their work. Like, for example, facing or going to the player, trying to damage the player, and then, of course, take damage if necessary, and so on and so forth. We are going to make use of some fixed spawn points. So we are actually today going to look into where do we spawn, how do we spawn, how we do it properly, how we set these prefabs up, and so on. But before we get started over here, I want to let you know that I have a free PDF just for you to download for free, my best 3 strategies to finish your game, so your game project. So please go down below into the description and check it out. There's a link below. Just grab your free copy over there if you're interested into that. Hi E-Roll, thanks a lot for tuning in, and yeah, have a good night as well. So today we are going to do something rather simple, I would say. So I'm gonna create some small project about the topic. So as Grant stated, he has some kind of a player. A player can be something static. It can be something movable. So we don't care, or I don't care at the point. We are more or less going to look into what are prefabs, how do we work with them properly, and how do we actually react with them. Probably we're gonna do some small animation. Since E-Roll had a request about how to do animations, I'm not quite sure if it has been 2D or 3D. I was writing him already, so probably you answer your question or my question now if you want to take a look into 2D or 3D animations, by the way. So let's get into the actual programming part, or actually in the process. So first off, we need to define or declare what is a prefab. And a prefab, I can explain it, is the best way I can explain it, is a template, or can be seen as a template. What does it mean is, well, we're gonna create one template, and from this template we can create multiple clones of one template. We basically just do the work once, and then we can make reuse of these prefabs. So prefab can be seen as a template over here. We can do the spawning wherever we want to. We can also define specific points to spawn the prefabs on, so they can do whatever they have to do. And we're going to talk about this in a sec. So what I'm going to do is I create some, let's say, small project over here where we, for example, have a tower or a building or a setting. It can also be, once again, a movable player, which I'm going to put in the center of the screen, like it should be here. So, and I'm gonna put this together right now. So to get the idea behind it, I'm gonna introduce first off a cube. I'm gonna center this one out completely. I reset it to 0, 0, 0. I lift it up half so it's not like underlying over here, and maybe I'm gonna put a plane around it so you get an idea of what I'm actually doing over there. Let's assume we're gonna do some kind of a defense game, or we would plan something like that. So I'm gonna create a new 3D object, plane, and I'm gonna reset this to 0 as well. So now what we need to do is we wanna, for example, protect our building in the center, and we're gonna have maybe something like 4 or 5 or 10 spawn points around the tower or our building, which can be, just be that cube. And we want to make sure that when these let's say enemies or whatever the prefabs are going to be, whenever they spawn over here, that they go to the player or to our tower and do, for example, some damage over there. And we can, of course, you can later on implement some different possibilities. For example, shoot these enemies down, or just destroy them in any other case, just by clicking them, for example, and so on and so forth. Okay, so let's get into prefabs. I'm gonna make the plane a bit bigger so it's not just so small. I'm gonna just just put a double size over here so we can see stuff better. I pretty quickly create 2 materials over here so we can see the differences, or maybe 3. For example, we have a prefab later on which is going to be colored red, so we can see it either in the scene and see what they actually do. So I'm gonna create a color or a material which is later on red. Then I duplicate this, Control D, make this one maybe green for the ground, and maybe gonna duplicate this once again, Control D to do this, and maybe something like blue for our tower. If you want to rename things, you can always go and hit F2 on your keyboard. So you can literally do all of that. I go to the albedo channel and make the blue one anyhow bluish. So I can put this on my tower or player or whatever. Then I'm gonna have a green one. Gonna put this over here. Can be a bit more darkish, so not too much, not too bright, and maybe something darkish red for our, red enemies or whatever they are. Okay, so when it comes to working with prefabs, once again, first we need to create an object which is going to behave as however we want it. For example, I create another 3D cube. Maybe I'm gonna make the size a bit smaller, maybe 0.5 in all three axes. Something like that. I'm gonna lift it up to the y-axis first at 0. So what you can now see is he still sticks into the ground, so by its own half. So we basically need to lift it up by 0.25 over here. So what we can now also do is with this little cube, we can tint it already like in red. We can also tint our background over here. Maybe I'm gonna make this a bit darker so it's not too bright. I'm gonna make my tower basically blue. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to make my little enemy. I can also rename it, by the way, enemy. It can be like anything. I can make this one a prefab already, or I'm gonna set it up completely first. So I check what the prefab has to do. Like, for example, what does my enemy, when he gets spawned over here, what does he have to do? Basically what we want to do is we want to move him like over the forward axis to a point where the player is. In this case, the player is going to be the cube. We can, for example, already do something like tag our cube with the player. We can also rename it already. So, and what we want to do is whenever this cube is close enough to that, maybe with a specific distance or to a specific distance, then we want to maybe hurt the little cube over here, and then we can, for example, destroy the prefab, or we just keep it as is and keep on doing damage meanwhile it is in range, whatever. There are multiple things we can move that little cubes later on. For example, we can make use of a nav mesh agent, but I don't want to go too deep into this because it can be troublesome here and there. So I just want to keep it small and simple. So I just move it by code over its forward axis, like I'm going to the actual player over there. So what do we need to do? Well, maybe we don't even go over the forward axis because it might be too troublesome even over here. So because we want to just understand what prefabs are and how we can work with them properly. So prefabs are when we have a prefab, when this one is a prefab, we should see over tag and stuff like that. There is going to be content about the prefab itself, like how we can override it, how we can update, how we can release it, how we can break it, and so on and so forth. Depending on the Unity version, that is a bit different. So I'm working with Unity 2K19 over here, 0.1.8F. So yours might be older or newer. Basically the workflow is basically the same. Okay, let me pretty quickly create something for my enemy so I can put stuff together anyhow and move my little enemy to the player and do damage whenever he is close enough, as an example. So we get an idea about how the actual enemies are going to act, how we move them, like in any way basically, and what we're gonna do whenever we are done with that, or whenever the player is or the enemy is not accessible anymore. Okay, so I just quickly open this one up in Mono Develop. You can, or you might need, or might use, you might use a Visual Studio for that. I'm gonna have my firewall popping up at least twice today for my Mono Behavior over here, or Mono Develop. So nothing about it. Good. So what do we want our enemies to do whenever they are getting started over here? Well, we want to make sure that we initialize something, meaning we want to find the actual player and we want to walk to it. So we set a target to be the player. So how do we do this? We can define the player itself already. but we cannot drag it into any slot. So in that case, we're gonna do something like a private target, basically, which we can later on just chase at or chase to. For example, we're gonna say it is of type transform. It can also be declared as a game object. Basically, it doesn't matter. So this is going to be like our target. This can be any target. This can be the player target once again. It can be a tower. It can be a mission target, whatever it is. So we can send him to this particular target over time whenever we want to. So we can have, once again, we have multiple possibilities to do that, and we can put this into the update loop for the most simple piece of it. We can also put this in a coroutine. We could put this like anywhere we want, and so on and so forth. Okay, so at start, we want to first find the target inside our actual, inside our game scene. There are, once again, multiple possibilities for that. The best way is probably if we have another script. I'm gonna name this one just player or player behavior, maybe. Player behavior. Maybe player is taken already, I'm not quite sure. And what we want to make sure is that our cube, like our player, has a player behavior script like this, directly connected to it. So what we can now do is we can make use of the player behavior script. My mono behavior would crash. Gonna have to save and quit just for a sec and have to reopen it. I hope it opened it up pretty quick. Once again, now I have multiple mono develops running. I'm sorry about that. Just takes a sec or two, I guess. Yeah, now I have it open twice. Pretty interesting. Okay, so now what we want to do is at start, we want to fill in the target. So whatever the target is we are looking for. In that case, we're going to say something like target is equal to, and now what we want to find is basically the object type, or a type of like an object of a specific type. This object type is going to be basically the script which is going to be called player behavior, which we are looking for. So we say find object of type, and in open close those triangle brackets, we're gonna put in the type we want to find. In that case, it's going to be the type player behavior, and we're gonna put in open close parentheses, and that might not work. So it cannot be basically this script now cannot be transformed into a transform target. So we're gonna take dot transform of this particular one. So we're gonna find first the player behavior script, and then we want to request a transform of this wherever this is connected to, and we're going to be able to store this inside a target. Okay, so now we have a transform, meaning we have a position where this target is going to be. And now we can basically move in the update loop whenever we have a target. We can do something like, okay, move this particular guy, like whatever the enemy, next to the actual target whenever the distance is higher than a specific amount, for example. So first off, we want to make sure that we have found the target. So we say if target is not equal to null. We always want to protect things like whenever we don't have a target, because that probably hasn't fired yet. We want to just do not do this, and otherwise we would get null reference exceptions and blah blah blah. We want to avoid all of that. So what we now want to do is, since we know where this is and we also know where our own transform is, we want to move it from our transform, like but not at 0, or basically not at the y height. We want to zero the y height out for the actual transform as well as our own position. We want to move it towards a point, or towards the vector of the other one, and maybe we reduce it by, let's say, a specific distance to it. Okay, so we can, for example, first off, measure the distance. So first, we're gonna do something like we measure the distance. We put this into a float. For example, float distance is equal to vector 3 dot distance. And now what we wanna know is the actual distance between two vectors. And since we need to have two vectors, we need to define the target as a vector as well as take our own vector. Our own vector is, of course, the position we want to. So what we want to make use of is the target dot position, and we want to take our own transform dot position. So now we know this distance. What we now can do is we can request now in an if statement if our distance is smaller or equal than whatever, or higher or equal than ever. I mean, while that is the case, we want to make sure that we add or actually move the player. Otherwise, we don't want to move this. So if, let's say, distance is bigger than, for example, bigger than 1, like 1 meter or 1 unit away, if that is higher than this, we want to say something like transform dot position is equal to, I believe we can simply do this, vector3 dot move towards a point, and the point is basically from our current vector, so we can do something like transform dot position, comma, and now we want to go to the target, so in this case target dot position. Target, well, typos today, target dot position, and then we can define a speed. So something like speed times time dot delta time. Something like that. Once again, we don't have speed yet, so I'm gonna implement a float speed, something like this, and we can actually define this with, let's say, a speed of 10. So, and of course we need to end the line with a semicolon over here. So now when our prefab gets instantiated, we don't have a spawning algorithm stuff yet, but if our object now spawns or our enemy just spawns, he first off wants to find the target. He wants to see where the player is. Then if he has found the target, we want to check how high the distance to the player is, and meanwhile the distance is bigger than 1, we want to put our, like, the enemy's position into the direction of the actual target position. What we also can do is, meanwhile, we can do something, I believe so, something like a transform dot look at, and we want to look basically at the target over here. So meanwhile we are walking, we always want to look to the actual target. So whenever we would have like a face or like something which is going to be like or like moving over the frontal part, then we want to make sure that we gonna always look with our nose or with the face into the direction of the enemy. There is one flaw, is going to be this transform dot position needs to be narrowed down, and we're gonna have to make sure that like the target position and the transform position is basically going to be at the same height, because otherwise it might be a bit complicated in the end, since we are not using a nav mesh agent where the pivot point is at the bottom. If we want to be more precise and want to make use of that directly on the bottom, we can do so by just creating an empty game object and snap it to the bottom, or just zero this one out. Maybe we're going to do this, but it might be a bit simpler. But we can also take the transform to position and just basically take our own transform to position and put this into another, let's say, space, I would say, yeah. So for example, we can also say something like we create a new vector3, and we're gonna say we start with 0, 0, 0, and we're gonna keep the y-axis at 0, so we always or whatever the height is, like our current height maybe. So we are not going to touch or basically we want to make sure that we are touching the ground the whole time. So every enemy might have a different height or a different lower bottom over here. Oh, wait, we're going to do it a bit different, since, well, that is going to be, it just overcomplicates it. So from our transform position, we're going to put it to the target position. I'm going to save the script for now, and I'm going to rearrange this enemy now, because maybe we're gonna put some graphics onto that later on as well. So first I create a new empty game object. Now you can see it's centered out. I want to make sure that I bring this one down to 0, but as you can see it's currently not at the 0 point possible. So I make it like 0 over here, so it's like under or on the feet of our enemy, so we can basically put multiple things or multiple graphics onto this. So this is now our actual enemy. So we have it at the 0 place over there, and our actual enemy, so basically our enemy, let's say graphic or model or whatever, is going to be like children now of that. And instead of putting all the content over here, like about the movement and stuff, we're gonna put the script over here. So the script always takes the 0 axis. Same for the player, since as you can see the pivot point is over here at the center. Since I'm not using, you know, my own models, my pivot point is not on the bottom but over here, so we have to actually correct that automatically. So I'm gonna create an empty, drag it out, reduce y value to 0, put player now onto, whoops, not on this, put player now on my new game object on this, so it is child of the main game object, and this player does not get the player behavior, so we get rid of it, remove. And we're gonna take the game object over here, and this is now our player behavior with the actual points over there, or with the actual position in the y-axis of 0. So also we can keep basically the player tag over there. If necessary, we can also put this over here. Basically, for the moment, it doesn't matter. Now, when we would press play at start, we should find this behavior, and our little cube over here should, when the actual script is connected, should automatically walk over to the blue cube until it reaches a destination space of 1 unit. Let's test it out. It was rather fast, and also I did not want it to see on maximize on play. Gonna reduce the speed of my enemy a bit, so maybe down to a 5, so we have a bit time to take a look into. So my well, currently it is not correctly looking at it, I guess. So I go to local and see where the local blue axis is going to be when I press play. It should be always looking to the blue cube. Pretty good. So now, as you can see, it reached a distance of like about 1 meter or 1 unit over here. And now what we want to make sure is that whenever we now have like multiple enemies, for example, we duplicate it here and here and here, that they all are doing the same. And that's what they do. They're gonna try to reach the blue cube, and wherever the ankle is, they are going to go next to it and stop when they are not able to reach it. So now we have another issue. We don't want to copy like all these clones or all these enemies like the whole time, because we can basically steer the amount of all these by using prefabs. So we're gonna make it so that our enemy now becomes a prefab. What I need to do is I just drag the enemy into my projects asset, whatever. And so my enemy now can be spawned from any point. Also, you can see the icon changed to be blue. If I now get rid of the enemy, I can always go and bring this back in here, and of course bring it anywhere else. And what it does is it keeps the connection to the script inside the prefab, because it is once again a template, or seen as a template. Meanwhile, the template now is on our little prefab. We can change it, we can change the interactabilities, we can make it shootable, we can do whatever we want to. We can also do any new actions putting in by code. Now what we just as final step we need to have probably more or less several spawn points anywhere to make our enemies spawn on this particular spawn points, maybe random. And of course we need to have a management system which takes care of the spawn points and say, okay, put one here, put one there, put one there, put one there, and then do their own actions. So to do so, I can put this, for example, directly on my player object if I want to. So I create a new C# script and name it maybe spawner. So this is basically just the instantiation part where this guys are going to spawn stuff. We could also make use of the player. Basically, again, does not really matter. I'm gonna put this here on my game object over there. Once again, this is the player. And the player here, this is basically the player graphic, whatever. Something like this. So Now, what we need to do is we put also the spawner on it. But once again, we can also put this on any empty game object. Basically, doesn't matter. And now I create some empty game objects. I'm gonna give them some icons so I can see them better. Want to make sure that they reset it to 0 on the y-axis at least. And so we can now see them over here. I'm gonna name this one maybe spawn point, or something like that. I'm gonna duplicate it, maybe like 2, 3, 4 times. Basically, it doesn't matter. So I have one in each corner as an example. Once again, you can do more, you can do less, completely up to you. And of course, we go into our script. I'm gonna close my mono behavior since it has crashed, or usually crashes whenever I put new content into it. I need to fix it, but it will do any other time. I don't know. So I'm gonna make use of a new build over here. And what I now want to do is I want to create some super simple spawn object or spawner, which is spawning my prefab of my enemy. And you can make use of a list for the spawn points or an array for the spawn points. Basically, it doesn't matter since it's a kind of static and does not really change overall. So let's assume we're going to put something like a public game object. So basically, we can also make use of a transform. Basically, it doesn't matter. Spawn points. Since there are multiple, like we can make use of an array, so we put square brackets over here, spawn points, and now what we want to do is what do we want to spawn is we're going to put something like public game object, this like our enemy prefab. If you have multiple prefabs, then of course you can put them also into an array and a list and a dictionary, whatever. Basically an array or a list is totally fine over here, up to you. So what we now want to do is we want to loop through all our spawn points, or basically pick a random one based on the size of that, and then spawn an enemy prefab to see if stuff works as it should. So, and we want to avoid using the update loop as much as possible, so we can basically get rid of it. But we maybe want to make sure, or we maybe want to make use of a coroutine in this case. So I'm gonna create first a start method, since we need to start the actual coroutine on start. So void start, and here we just start the coroutine in the end. So for now we're gonna create a coroutine called IE numerator. Maybe name it spawner or just spawn. You could also maybe name it spawn enemies, whatever. And meanwhile this coroutine is going to run, we want to do spawn stuff. So, and we only start this once, so it keeps on going until we basically stop it. Or the game does stop it, like for example we actually exit the scene or something like that. So what we want to do is, while true is going to be our while loop over here. So meanwhile this loop is running, and basically with while true it's like continuously always running. We want to maybe say something like we will wait for 3 seconds. So yield return new wait for seconds. And let's assume we're gonna wait like 3 seconds, so 3f. After that 3 seconds, we want to spawn an enemy prefab at a random spawn point. So first we calculate the spawn point which we want to make use of. So we put in something like an int index is equal to random dot range. And in open close parentheses, we now can calculate that by the size of the spawn point. So we want to have a range between or an index between 0, because 0 is the first index in an array or list or even dictionary. And of course, our spawn points dot length in this case. If you're using lists, of course, this is going to be spawn points dot count. Now we know the spawn point which we want to make use of. And the next one is, of course, we want to spawn or instantiate the actual enemy prefab. So we can say something like instantiate, open close parentheses. Now, what do we want to instantiate is our enemy prefab. We later on drag in. Now we need to define the position and the rotation of the spawn point, or the enemy itself. So for now, we can just say for the position, we want to position that on spawn points in square brackets, whatever the calculated index is, dot position, or since it is a game object, we need to put in transform dot position, of course. And Now we need to have the rotation. Basically, we can make use of quaternion.identity. Identity. So basically the rotation of the prefab itself. We don't do much or anything much over there. We just spawn every 3 seconds a new enemy or enemy prefab. Instead, we just call or start the coroutine. So we say start coroutine, open close parentheses. Now we can put it like a function or like in a string parameter, completely up to you. We're gonna say spawn, open close parentheses, close the line with a semicolon, and we are basically done with an unlimited spawner. Once again, if you have multiple enemies and you want to mix them, you can also automate them. And instead of using just enemy prefab, you're going to do the same as this one. We just calculate an index for the enemy prefabs and then go a bit deeper into it and just randomly, pick from enemy prefabs list if we have multiple. We're going to take a look, probably, if I don't forget it, into this in a sec as well. But basically, you get the idea, I guess, since we automate all that stuff here as well. So I now go to my player and I now drag all my spawn points into that. First, I'm gonna make use of the little lock symbol over here in the corner, so I keep that locked. I can now multiple select all of these 4 and drag them onto the name of spawn points, and all of them are now in here. And the final step, I enable or disable the lock symbol again, and now I drag my enemy prefab over here into the enemy prefab. Also, if I want to work on that, like on the prefab itself, I can double click it and can work on it even more. Like I can change the enemy graphic if I want to. For example, I can duplicate the enemy graphic over here. I can, scale stuff together, make it look like, I don't know, whatever I want to. For example, like this, I just want to make sure that the Z value is going to be like always here. Maybe you want to make a nose with that guy. So you can always double click that guys or that enemies and rearrange things on them. So for example, now we see wherever the nose is, if you see this as a nose, then everything is going to keep on that. When we now press play, gonna save beforehand, we should see that our prefab gets now spawned on, or all our prefabs are going to get spawned. They move to where they should. And they do everything they should do, like they should go to the player or close to it and do whatever they have to do. So in the end, you can say that prefabs are always doing the same. Even if I would now go and move this cube, like over here, for example, well, at this point, I cannot, or it will not be recalculated because we do the target set recalculation over here. If we would change the actual target, like not just over here, but over somewhere else, then we would basically, or we would take not the transform, but the game object, for example, and we would not take a fixed position at this case. We can also do this like automatically when the player is walking around and stuff like that. We can basically completely working onto this. Also, maybe this calculation is a bit different then, but in the end you get the idea, I guess. So now we can also do damage, for example, to the player if we like to. Like, for example, if they have reached this one, this like the one distance or whatever the target distance is going to be, we can do something like we trigger doing damage. We can trigger anything we want to just by talking to the player behavior script over here. So we basically don't have to do anything anymore than with the spawner object. We just take the player behavior, put in some health, like for example if we need to protect ourselves, we're gonna put in some health, and then we can let it tick down. The simplest way over here, well, this is the wrong window. The simplest way over here, of course, is by the player behavior itself. You usually have something like a float or integer for your health. Gonna make it public so we see it better. Public int current, or current health. Usually you work with multiple health values, so a maximum health, a current health, and the actual how shall I say, the current health and the maximum health basically. So but for my little example over here, I just use current health. We maybe start with equal to 100 or something like that, and what we want to do is we want to get or just take damage from our enemies over there. So I have a tutorial about taking damage and doing damage already, so if you want to check it out, you are absolutely free to do so. So in this case, we're gonna have to create a public void, something like take damage. Once again, I have a tutorial, a more in-depth tutorial about taking damage and doing damage to this, but we're gonna take a look into this kind of closely here as well. So public void take damage, and now we can put in something like an integer. How much do we want to do over here, like the amount we want to do with one specific enemy. So if you have multiple different types, maybe they do more or less damage to, like, against each other or whatever, or against the player. And what we now want to do is we want to say we want to take our current health and negate it by whatever the amount is. But if you don't want to do it like minus equal, you can also do it plus equal. Then you need to make sure that you always put a negative number, like from the enemy itself over here as well. So plus and minus equals minus in the end. And of course we can then do something like if our current health is smaller or equal to 0, then we lose the game basically. So we can just print a message, print player destroyed, something like that, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. So, and this is basically everything we need to do to take the damage from the actual player. Now we need our enemy to talk to this particular one. We can, for example, do something like with a coroutine here as well. So whenever this distance is lower than that, we can basically put a bool around all of that, something like target reached, if it is a static target, and then we're gonna call the coroutine, which is repeatedly doing the damage to the player behavior. Because we have targeted this one already, we can also, capture or make use of the player behavior script every time we want to. Also, we can randomize damage if we like to. So in this case, we're gonna introduce maybe another coroutine. So enumerator attack, whatever, and it doesn't matter how it looks. The attack itself, about the graphics, animations, and stuff, we don't cover this in this tutorial. So we can now just call the actual player behavior over here. We can, for example, already cast or just actually store the information about it here as well. So we catch the player behavior probably here at start as well. So maybe we're gonna do it like player with small letters, and maybe we're gonna do something like player is equal to the player behavior, like this, and the target is going to be equal to player dot, and now we basically take the transform. So we have basically now both, and now we can directly talk to the player over here and the player script. So what we do once again is in here while we are in range. So for now I just once again do something like a while true method if necessary. We wanna wait something like yield return new wait for seconds, maybe every 2 seconds we want to do an attack. We can also put a 1 second, half a second, or even tenths of a second. Then we want to talk to the player, so we basically say player dot, and now we call take damage, and now we want to put in any argument of the amount we want to do over there. So we can once again randomize that, so random dot range, and put in something like some damage between 0 or 1 and 5. So we at least take 1 damage, or even 5 as the highest. And since we have like this one in a while loop, it's going to constantly run in this enumerator whenever we are able to do that. So once the distance is basically like, once the distance is basically smaller than that, so else we're gonna be able, or should be able to, well, not with open close parentheses, we should be able to just start the coroutine and basically stop the movement here as well by, using a boolean or something. So, like whenever we have reached the actual player over there. So we basically just say something like start coroutine, open close parentheses, and then here we just do our attack. Once again, if you have a moving player, this is kind of a bit different later on, like in the targeting. I would rather go using something like a NavMesh agent for the movement, but for here, for my simple task over there, I just go into here. Once again, we are basically just talking about what the prefabs should do, since that is how we work with prefabs. We just fill them in with information and they are going to perform all of that automatically. So like when the enemy is closer than a distance of 1, we should start the coroutine and attack every once a second by a random number between 1 and 5 to the player. Don't forget to save the script, of course. Let's see, player, target, whatever. And if we randomize the damage, we don't really care about it. So, and in here, once again, we want to make sure that we take a negative number. So maybe something like -1 or -5. I'm not quite sure if that works, or if that does not work, maybe you're gonna do it different. Maybe I can negate the random range over here, so we don't need to put it like between two minus numbers. Maybe we can just say a -1 and 5. Never tested that before. That's new for me as well, so if the compiler doesn't like that, he will tell me in a sec. And even then, we should be able to put this like into parentheses and can negate everything which is inside the parentheses as the result. So what we can do is now we see our current health is starting at 100, and when I now press play, I'm gonna let the enemies come to me, and I'm gonna pause whenever I took the first damage. So first off, he needs to reach it. Now he's done, and as you can see now, it's ticking downwards multiple times actually. And this multiple times is basically happening because this coroutine now constantly starts. So it adds up quite fast. So we want to make sure that one enemy is only attacking with one coroutine. Otherwise we have like hundreds or thousands of coroutines and the player's damage is ticking down too much. That's why I say, okay, we're gonna implement a boolean, something like is attacking. So in that case, we want to make sure that the coroutine only starts once. We want to make sure that we protect this attack over there with this particular boolean. So we can try to start the coroutine, but we don't do this. And by the way, that is the awful part about update, because it constantly runs. So what we want to do is maybe we're going to do something like else. Something like... maybe we connect the boolean with the distance check. That would be a possibility. Something like end is, oops, wrong parameter. End is not attacking. So meanwhile we are walking basically and not attacking at the moment. We want to go to it, of course. And otherwise we're going to copy maybe the complete if statement. Else if the distance is like smaller or equal to 1. So basically we make sure that we get at least to this point, but we want to make sure that when we are close to it and we are not attacking, then we want to start the coroutine. And as well over here we want to say is attacking is equal to true. So once we are basically going into the coroutine, we want to set it to be is attacking, so we are not able to perform the second part here as well. Don't forget to save. And now we should only see one coroutine running. We can, by the way, or you can, by the way, also do a print line over here, print. And maybe we're going to put a number or something like started attack. So you can literally see how often one guy or one enemy starts an attack or starts to perform an attack. And maybe we're gonna put this into a 10 seconds or maybe a 5 seconds. I will do this because I want to see it a bit better. For debugging purposes, you're gonna just spread apart things. So now we just have to wait 5 seconds until the first one comes out. And now we want to see, okay, he started one attack once. That's what we wanted. And he keeps on going and do this. And now we have a second guy who's also starting his attacks. A third guy coming here, and we only attack with like 3 coroutines. We don't move or anything anymore, I guess. So we are basically just looping in a kind of an empty, update loop, but all of these guys now adding up with the attacks. As you can see, I'm not or already at minus numbers over there. So, and it will continually stack up. So as you can see, the prefabs, like whenever we work with prefabs and we have like this enemy with this one script and everything is already updated to it, we can simply, you know, make use of prefabs in different behaviors. We can give them state machines, we can let them do whatever we want to, as long as they are connected to the prefab we are going to spawn over here. So, Grant, I hope I actually explained everything well enough. So that, once again, was a request by Grant. So please check out the community tab if you have any questions, something you want to actually get narrowed down, any informations you want to have. I hope you enjoyed the stream, and if you do so, feel free to go down below into this description. There is a 3 strategies to finish your game guide as a free PDF to download, so check it out if you want to. And yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to ask now, and if you don't have any questions for furthermore working with prefabs, let me know, and we're gonna be able to, or might be able to answer them completely over here. No questions? Okay, that's fine. No problem at all. Once again, if you later on have any questions about working with prefabs or any other things, then feel free to check out this or just write me a comment over there, and I try to explain or even give you some hints and ideas about it. Also, check out my new and my old courses about how to create specific games. I'm teaching on udemy.com. Just check out the links below in the description as well, and maybe there's a course for you already over here. Thanks a lot for tuning in into this live stream. I hope you enjoyed this one, and even if you watch this one later, I hope you enjoyed this one as well. And yeah, take care. Bye bye.